Paul, welcome to Inside Albania. Thank you for joining me. It's a great pleasure to have you online with me today.
Good to be with you.
Let's get to the first question. Now, you have been with the CIA, you were with the CIA for a very long time. You have experience in this area, and I'm wondering, from your perspective, what can you tell us about the MEK? Who are this group that are currently in Albania?
The MEK is an Iranian opposition group that has its origins back in the 1960s when the Shah was still the ruler of Iran. It opposed the Shah's rule. It was engaged in violent activities then. It earned its later label as a terrorist group with some of the operations that it conducted, and indeed some American officials fell victim to MEK violence. So it was acting in parallel with Ayatollah Khomeini's actions, one could say, in overthrowing the Shah. But later it had a falling out with the Islamic Republic and turned against it. I think the signal event in that history, certainly from Iranians' point of view, was that the MEK threw in its lot with the Saddam Hussein regime in Iraq during the 8-year-long Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s, in which it in effect became a kind of security auxiliary to the Iraqi forces. And then since then, it has had this sort of checkered physical and political history, which had it going on and off the U.S. list of foreign terrorist organizations. And now, as you know, its main physical location is a camp in Albania. I think I just one further thing. Many people have characterized it as a cult, which I think is an accurate description. It had this couple, now the remaining survivor, Mariam Rajabi, who have treated it as a cult. So you can put whatever label you want on it: terrorist group, cult, opposition group. All of those have applied to it at different times.
Now, I want to say as well, criticizing the MEK does not make someone pro-Iran. This is a narrative which has been used against me before. I've been inside the camp. I went to one of the rallies. I was invited before they realized that I was a journalist. And what I saw was quite cult-like, but I was massively attacked when I wrote about it and accused of being paid by Iran and supporting Iran, which is absolutely not the case. So I want to preclude the rest of our conversation by saying that being critical of the MEK does not equate to support for Iran. But the MEK have, at this rally I was at, there were extremely senior people from the American government and former officials of the American government there speaking in support of the MEK. They have enjoyed significant support from the US, from the UK, from Albania itself. Is this genuine? Is it support for them, or is it opposition towards Iran?
It's two things. One, it's opposition to Iran, and you speak a very important truth when you mention that any criticism of the MEK is not to be equated with support for the current Iranian regime. But unfortunately, that is one of the ways in which the MEK has played in American politics, and they've won a lot of the support, including members of Congress and other prominent Americans, as you mentioned. That's one aspect of the story. The other is they have basically bought, with cash, a lot of that support, providing, large speaking fees to prominent American figures to speak at their rallies, that sort of thing. I think it's still somewhat of a mystery exactly where all that money comes from, but I think it's a combination of this basically being bought and as you mentioned, trying to equate any kind of opposition to the current Islamic Republic as something to be praised, no matter what the nature of the group involved, and I think it's a loathsome nature when we're talking about the MEK.
And I mean, speaking fees are a thing. If I go and speak somewhere, sometimes I get an honorary or a fee. It really depends, So these speaking fees are normal in many circles, but you touched on something to do with where the money comes from. Is this something that the CIA in your time has ever looked at or sort of tried to trace? Or you can't say?
Possibly. I can't speak directly to
No, no.
that, but I think it's, yeah, anything like that, and certainly under the current U.S. administration, there would be an awful lot of sensitivity about
Yes.
that sort of thing, and
Yeah, yeah.
probably hesitation to dig very, very deeply into it. Although, I should mention when the lobbying in favor of the MEK in Washington succeeded in getting them off the U.S. list of foreign terrorist organizations, it was actually back during the Obama administration. So it's not something that is unique to any U.S. administration, Republican or Democrat, in terms of how the whole MEK issue has been handled.
And obviously, they are a target of Iran, and as Albania is hosting them, Albania has been targeted by Iran through cyber attacks. Do you think there is any danger of an escalation in the kind of attacks Albania could face in keeping MEK here? And do you think there's a point where Albania might say it's maybe not worth, keeping them?
There may well be a danger, and I think this relates to what we've just seen transpire over the last 2.5 weeks, the war in which Israel, later joined by the United States, attacked Iran. And the Iranian regime, although I don't think it's on the verge of collapsing anytime soon, is obviously feeling very vulnerable with regard to any kind of opposition. And we've seen it inside Iran since the start of the war, and it continues now. A harsh crackdown on not only genuine opposition, but just suspected opposition. The first priority is to try to find any of those Israeli spies that have been working inside Iran, but the regime's crackdown is going far beyond that.
Yes.
So it is a part of this, I think, to reach out to any kind of opposition and try to crush it, negate it. And so this is just speculation, but I would not rule it out. And I would say the chances right now today are higher than they have been recently for the Iranians to try to do something about the MEK presence in Albania.
It's concerning, it's near Tirana, it's in a relatively residential area. I mean, there's small villages around it. It's quite worrying. Are there any other opposition groups sort of active, and how do you think the war in Iran has affected their approach to cracking down on this opposition? Is it what you said, they're now more likely to sort of go beyond borders to crack down on opposition? Now they feel cornered.
Well, you've got all kinds of varieties of opposition, including those who are not sworn enemies of the Islamic Revolution, are not radicals in any sort, but rather are ones we would consider sort of Iranian moderates who have supported in the past presidents like Khatami, who have been opposed to the hardliners on many policy questions in Iran. So that the hardliners in the current regime consider them as opponents as well. And then you've got other outside opposition, most notably the monarchists who are centered around Reza Pahlavi, the son of the current Shah. I should note that certainly with regard to Pahlavi, but it also applies more to the point to the MEK. The support inside Iran is at best minimal, and I will go farther than that to say the MEK is bereft of support inside Iran. And I think this mainly goes back to that history I mentioned earlier of the Iran-Iraq War. I mean, where the MEK was rightly considered a bunch of traitors in taking the side of Saddam Hussein. Iranians have not forgotten that. That was a horrible war in which hundreds of thousands of Iranians lost their lives. So they do not have support inside Iran.
Talking about Iran as a nefarious actor, we see with Russia, it's not just the direct action it takes, but it also, for example, in the Western Balkans, it sows instability in other ways through misinformation, through fake news, through sort of putting a flame to already simmering sort of conflicts like with Serbia and with Kosovo. Do we see Iran working in this way, or are they more fond of the direct attack approach, whether it is militarily, maybe not so much, but things like cyber attacks, which they're pretty good at?
Oh, it's all of the above. There's no question. There's already an Iranian regime record in doing those sorts of things. They have conducted clandestine assassinations or attempted assassinations. Many of those have been in response to things the Israelis have tried to do. And I would not rule out the the cyber operations as well. But no, the short answer is it's all of the above.
We could assume perhaps that there are Iranian operatives operating in the region as well, perhaps.
Yes, there are. Although I should note, that there is a countervailing consideration in that the regime is concerned about its relations with Europe in general and the European Union. And I think, this would be, at least in the backs of the minds of Iranian decision makers, if they contemplate any kind of operation, either clandestine or open, in Albania. Going back a number of years, you had, and this was going back to the early years of the Islamic Republic, you had a number of assassinations of exiled dissidents on European soil, places like France. And one of the main things that caused that campaign to come to an end several years later was the concern by the regime about the nature of its relations with the Europeans. Now, since then, we've got all kinds of complicating issues, the nuclear issue, of course, being the big one, and the relationship is not good at all between the Iranian regime and the EU and the major European powers because of that. But I think there's still the hope among most elements of the regime to someday have a civilized and mutually profitable relationship with the Europeans, and that would be a source of hesitation. But right now, I think that the main concerns are, well, not so much concerns, but the main impulse on the part of the regime is to strike back at any kind of source of opposition at a time of vulnerability in the wake of the U.S. and Israeli attacks.
And that potentially puts a target on Albania, because there's no other countries hosting an opposition group like of this magnitude.
That's right. I mean, well, there would be, individual, other exiled dissidents who might be the targets of assassination in other countries. But in terms of a group that has an organizational presence, someplace, you're talking about the MEK in Albania. Perhaps the only thing that comes remotely close to that is that the monarchists who I mentioned before around Pahlavi have kind of a concentration of support in the Los Angeles area in the United States, but it's still not equivalent to the MEK, having its presence at a camp in Albania.
Now, I want to ask you another question as well. President Donald Trump's diplomacy. It's a bit of a different breed from maybe the other kinds of diplomacy that we're used to. Everyone goes and they have a meeting and they shake hands and they take a picture after, or they don't, or, we've figured out a way forward, we've got to work together. He doesn't take that sort of approach. Does it ever make you a bit nervous how he sort of speaks and threatens and the language he uses? I mean, there seem to be some results, but knowing what you know about the various players involved in these discussions, does it ever make you think, oh, maybe he's playing with fire, or that's a bit of a risk to take?
No, it's not just makes me nervous, it makes me dismayed. I mean, this applies not just to the issues we're talking about, but the whole corpus of foreign policy. And we've seen some of you say, well, it sometimes gets results. I mean, there are other results. You can look at polling numbers in which people in foreign countries are asked, what countries they respect or admire, or basically have a positive or negative opinion. And the U.S. poll numbers have plummeted since Trump came back to power. and you've got alliances that are totally wrecked. We have the Canadians next door who have been traditionally our closest and best friends,
Yes.
and Trump has made an enemy out of them. I mean, that's awful.
He threatened to invade
So,
Greenland, I mean, poor Greenland and
well,
Denmark.
yeah,
They weren't expecting that.
all that sort of nonsense. Yeah, there has been damage done to U.S. foreign policy and the U.S. standing in the world that will take many, many, many years to repair, even after Trump is no longer on the scene.
He said as well locally, that he'd managed to avert a war between Kosovo and Serbia as well. And, I don't know if that's true or not. It's maybe not your area of expertise, but it's just a dangerous game to be playing, with these big sort of authoritarian type characters who are somewhat unpredictable. That I include him in that description as well. It just seems it's a very fine line to walk between someone getting annoyed with him and pressing the nuke button, or managing to actually resolve the situation.
Well, yeah, in terms of cavorting with dictators, then when you're in the European area, we're talking about a couple of regimes in particular, obviously Putin's, and Trump has had this strange and as yet largely uncovered relationship with the Russians and with Putin's regime, going back to before he was president, and he was seeking to build to do real estate deals, in Moscow, that sort of thing. And then of course there's the relationship with the Orban regime in Hungary, which is really kind of the bad boy of the European Union, and certainly the biggest black mark among EU countries in terms of retrogressing from what had been a democracy into more of an authoritarian state. And Trump, admires that sort of thing. He's a would-be dictator himself. So even in the European realm, you see a lot of damage being done, and notwithstanding the kind of cringeworthy scenes we saw at the recent NATO summit, in which we have foreign leaders, including the Secretary General of the alliance, figuring out that the best way to try to get some positive result from Trump is just to flatter him obsequiously. As I say, it is cringeworthy, and maybe it does get some results, but
they're probably terrified that they'll be the next target, if they don't flatter him enough.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's worked domestically here in the United States, where even individuals who had been considered allies of Trump or members of his party become targets of his wrath and of retribution because they said something that maybe differed with one of his assertions. So that sort of dynamic plays out in the foreign realm as well as domestically.
Yes. I'm a member of an international journalists organization. I've been a member of them for 15 years, and this was the first time they've ever issued a travel warning for the United States for journalists, with a full list of instructions of what to do, what not to do, precautions to take to protect yourself, your data, your devices, etc. I mean, it was something that really shocked me. These are travel warnings you'd expect if you were going into sort of an active war zone, or North Korea, perhaps, not the United States. It's quite a disappointing turn of events.
Yeah, there are very sound reasons for anyone traveling to the United States to be concerned about those sort of things, and it certainly applies to journalists as well as to anyone else.
Yes, it's a sad state of affairs. Paul, thank you so much for your time. This has been fascinating. I wish we had longer. Thank you for everything you've said today.
You're quite welcome.
Thanks.